This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelia Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Beijing urges Mexico to drop its protectionist practices after the Latin American country approved tariffs of up to 50% on goods from China and other Asian trading partners. Now, Tokyo says it's reaffirmed with Washington a firm stand against any unilateral change to the status quo by force as the allies stage joint air drills after similar shows of force by China and Russia. Deadly clashes between Thailand and Cambodia have continued for a fourth day, with both sides asking the UN Security Council to condemn the other and awaiting a call from President Trump. Now, Hong Kong is tightening scaffolding rules after the deadly Tai Po blaze. Contractors must prove their mesh is fire retardant, with lab tests covering major repairs and new builds. And China's outlook gets another lift. The World Bank boosts its GDP forecast, hot on the heels of an IMF upgrade. Ahead on the bulletin, a widening political scandal in South Korea, with the Oceans Minister resigning after being accused of receiving bribes from the Unification Church. Mexico has approved tariff hikes of up to 50% on imports from China and several Asian countries. The new levies will take effect starting next year on more than 1,400 products. Now, the bill targets countries without trade deals with Mexico, including China, India, South Korea, Thailand, and Indonesia. Goods affected include cars, textiles, clothing, plastics, and steel. Most will likely see duties of around 35%. The Finance Ministry estimates that the move will raise about $2.8 billion in extra revenue next year. The decision taking place as Washington is pressuring Mexico to curb the flow of Chinese goods into the U.S. market. But President Claudia Sheinbaum is denying any possible connection between her country's policy and America's trade tensions with China. The United States is by far Mexico's largest source of imports and its biggest trading partner. Asian imports are a crucial part of Mexico's supply chain. China is by far its largest Asian exporter, running a major trade surplus of over $70 billion last year. South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and Malaysia are also key suppliers to Mexico. For more on this, we are joined by CNA's Tan Yu-Guan reporting to us live from Shanghai. Yu-Guan, firstly, how has Beijing reacted to the move, and how damaging has this been for Mexico's relations with China?
Well, so far, Beijing has only been reacting to the move in words, and beyond an earlier investigation, it has yet announced any other retaliatory actions. In response to a media query today on this matter, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce called on Mexico to correct what it calls wrong practices of unilateralism and protectionism as soon as possible. The spokesperson says the measures, if implemented, will substantially harm the interests of relevant trading partners, adding that China will monitor closely the implementation of the measures and further evaluate their potential impact. The spokesperson, however, did note the proposal approved included some adjustments from the September version, such as a certain degree of reduction in proposed tariff rates for certain auto parts, like industrial products, as well as textiles and garments. According to the spokesperson, the ministry has already initiated a trade and investment barrier investigation against Mexico at the end of September in accordance with the law, and the investigation is right now underway. The spokesperson did leave the door open to negotiations, saying that Beijing highly values the economic and trade relationship with Mexico and expects Mexico to meet China halfway, strengthen dialogue to properly manage differences to maintain that relationship. Those reconciliatory sentiments are echoed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry in their news briefing today as well. Let's take a listen.
我们想强调，逆经济全球化潮流而动，搞保护主义，损人不利己。希望莫方及早纠正有关错误做法，同中方相向而行，共同维护好双边经贸关系大局。
It's worth noting that along with the new tariffs, Mexican lawmakers did approve a measure that will empower Mexico's economy ministry to adjust import levies. This leaves the door open for China and Mexico to come to the negotiating table. It's also worth noting that China isn't the only country affected by Mexico's proposed tariffs. Other Asian countries that do not have trade deals with Mexico, such as India and South Korea, would also be affected. Now, according to a letter from an industry group of India car exporters reviewed by Reuters, Mexico tariffs will affect $1 billion worth of shipments, including those from Volkswagen and Hyundai. Otelli?
Well, but what about Mexico? I mean, in terms of how concerned generally is Mexico about retaliation from China, especially when it comes to copper?
Well, when we look at the trade relationship between these two countries, China does run a huge trade surplus with Mexico. According to China's customs data, last year it exported $71 billion more than it imported from Mexico. While copper ore and concentrates could be a potential target if China decides to retaliate, but here's the thing, the metal is essential for renewable energy industry. Demand is also rising amid a boom in data centers and digital infrastructure projects. So Mexico can find other customers given the strong demand for the metal. That said, the same goes for China. China sources copper from many countries. So China also has a strategic flexibility should it choose to retaliate by shutting off Mexican copper. But in a nutshell, any retaliatory move on copper by Beijing in this case is unlikely to alter the source of the copper supply. It's just likely to alter the source of the copper supply to China. It is unlikely to create enough pressure for Mexico to make a U-turn. Otelli?
Right, many thanks for that report. CNA's Tan Yu Guan speaking to us live from Shanghai. Well, we're going to go over to Roland Lim now for a check on how markets have been doing.
Thanks, Otelli. Greater China markets are in the doldrums this Thursday. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong at one point was up more than 1% on Fed rate cut optimism, but profit-taking has set in, ending the day flat, 25,530. On the mainland, Shanghai Composite down 0.7%. Second bourse, the tech-laden Shenzhen component worse off by 1.27%.
All right, we have more analysis coming, so we're going to bring in Gary Ng, a senior economist with Natixis. Gary, thanks for joining us this evening. Let's start with a big picture question. On paper, this looks like Mexico defending its own factories, but to what extent, Gary, do you see Mexico's tougher line on Asia imports as de facto alignment with Washington's tariff agenda?
Well, I think it's very clear that this move is really because of this growing trade deficit that Mexico has with many Asian countries, especially China. And of course, domestically, one could argue that this is part of this Plan Mexico that was announced in January 2025. This is about improving the value-added items in Mexico, about domestic substitution. However, because of the expiry or the negotiation of the USMCA, which is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement that is coming in mid-2026, it's hard really not to link the two issues together. So I do think that this is a move for the Mexico to gain more bargaining chip with the US and possibly stay in this trade agreement with the manufacturing circle.
Gary, Roland here. So you are convinced that this would help Mexico secure relief from Trump's threatened tariffs on, say, Mexican steel, for example. And it's going to give them more bargaining power ahead of that next USMCA review with Washington.
Yes, indeed. If you look at the biggest share, the trading partner of Mexico, definitely the U.S. is the most important one. And then if Mexico agrees to fall into part of this influence of the U.S. in terms of the trade and investment agreement, I do think that it is a positive step to reach a more easy agreement with the U.S. It's hard to really predict what Trump will do, but at least I think it is like a good gesture to reduce the tension with the U.S., but possibly not with the rest of the world.
Well, meantime, what we're seeing is that Chinese investment into Mexico is booming, even as tariffs go up. So, Gary, let's say if you're a Chinese or Asian manufacturer and you're watching this, is Mexico basically saying, don't ship to us, you come build here if you want the U.S. market?
Yes, exactly. I think this is indeed the rule in many countries nowadays. If you look at Europe, there's a growing push for the industrial policies to produce there and sold in Europe. The same is true for Mexico. The only difference is that it is about this market, mainly to the US and possibly to Canada as well. So with the high tariff, I think for most of the Asian manufacturers, they will need to consider setting up more factories in Mexico, especially in the targeted sectors such as automobile, steel, and also textile.
Gary, you mentioned automobiles, electronics, metals. Which Asian exporters and sectors are now most exposed to Mexico's new tariffs of up to 50%? How quickly do you think this will show up in the trade flows? I mean, does this effectively, shuts down the transshipment model through Mexico?
Well, I would say that not all the countries are being put on the list because there are countries with the FTA with Mexico that are not affected by this extra tariff. So in Asia, I do think that there could be some leeways for Japan to actually gain an upper hand in really shipping more goods to Mexico under this environment. And for China, it is the biggest trading partner with Mexico in Asia. The size is biggest, but the country also faced deflationary pressure. So, of course, we will likely see Chinese firms moving to Mexico to capture the U.S. market. But at the same time, China could probably adjust the price to reduce the impact of the tariff as well. So as the major loser, I do think South Korea will be the mostly affected because of the heavy exposure to both auto parts and also steel to the Mexican market.
Oh, Gary, we've mentioned that Mexico has trade deals with more than 50 countries, including Japan, but not China, India, or South Korea, for instance. So with all these new tariffs, how does that shift the playing field for, Tokyo and the other FTA partners?
Well, definitely, Japan is also one of the major investors in Mexico as well, because you can imagine there's many Japanese car makers may have the facilities in Mexico and try to sell into the US and also about other sector in steel, etc. So definitely, it can give Japan upper hand in terms of the lower cost in really tapping into the US market. And for the other players like Japan, like China and also South Korea, it really depends on how quickly they are able to establish their facilities in Mexico. And I think this is something that we need to watch.
Gary, China obviously not happy about the situation. It's launched a formal probe into Mexico's trade barriers. How does this change the capital flows into, say, manufacturing in Mexico as well as into alternative Asian export hubs?
Well, it is probably quite difficult for China to retaliate through the usual means with the US because Mexico barely export too many goods to China. So I think what China would do is really about targeting certain sectors in putting tariff and possibly also restricting the investment or the technology flow into Mexico as well. And let's not forget one of the fastest growing sectors in Mexico is really the automobile sector, which is related to electric vehicles. And if China restrict the investment, especially of the battery technology into Mexico, this can actually create some supply chain problem and exert pressure. So I would say that it will try to retaliate, but through different means.
Now, Gary, I just want to pick up on this China Economic Work Report that just came in, where China has maintained, quote, fiscal deficit and debt levels while working to basically address local government financial strains in 2026. I just want to get your initial thoughts on this.
Well, I would say that the statement hasn't changed too much from the ones that we see previously. It's pretty much just an reinforcement of the policy of what we have been seeing. And China has been allocating a large part of the resources through government bond issuance in mitigating all this debt risk. So this is pretty much just an affirmation that this will continue in 2026 and beyond. And I think one point to look at is that whether all of these policies will come with the more relaxed monetary policy, because at the end of the day, China needs the liquidity in the banking sector to help achieving a lot of these policy goals.
Right, plenty there for Asian exporters to chew on. Thanks so very much for your time and thoughts. Gary Ng, senior economist with Natixis.
And coming up on East Asia Tonight, a long-running U.S. bribery probe circles back to China's ZTE. The company could be facing another massive fine, possibly in the billions of dollars. And later, Japan looks to boost corporate investment with fresh tax breaks, even as its massive debt load raises alarm bells in the financial markets.
Bloody in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics. Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos?
Pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
It's Asia's leading beach destination, but tourists are skipping the Philippines.
Minsan ilang araw walang mga foreigner.
Why is the archipelago trailing behind its neighbours in visitor arrivals?
The number of tourist arrivals in the Philippines in the last 12 months is about 55-60% of 2019.
People think we're a dangerous place.
And can it attract tourists again?
We just have to do more in marketing our country better.
Insight tonight on CNA.
This is for those who move, those who don't wait for things to happen. They make them happen. They don't follow maps, they draw them and build what isn't there. They don't call it instinct, they call it Tuesday.
At Standard Chartered, we're here for those who never stand still, who want trusted expertise in the world's most dynamic markets.
Now is your time.
Quay bài hát nè, mà đết vội. Em lại bữa lại just to feel vài cái. Anh tiêu bớt chỉ giàu để rocket.
Misinformation created panic, confusion among the public.
नेपालको ढोकामा हामी उभिरहेका छौं त्यो ढोका खोल्न
I've written almost 28,000 e-letters to the inmates in the prison so that they don't feel left out. But in December 2024, the doctor told me that my prognosis is less than 12 months.
I'll continue writing emails every day to the inmates till I die.
Hidden Heroes, Saturday on CNA. CNA Summit, coming soon in February 2026.
Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. We've got Roland Lim back again in action with more business news. And I believe the World Bank just upgraded China's 2025 growth. What's changed?
Yes, the World Bank has now sees 4.9% growth, the IMF 5%. And that's on the stronger than expected domestic demand and policy stimulus measures. The World Bank says China's maintained a steady pace of economic expansion in the third quarter, lifting its year-to-date GDP growth. Now that puts the world's second largest economy on track for 4.9% growth for the whole of this year, despite trade policy uncertainty. The lender says supportive fiscal and monetary policies have helped shore up domestic consumption and exports remained resilient. But consumers stayed cautious amid a soft employment picture and a cooling housing market. The lender says China's growth is expected to be more subdued next year at 4.4%, citing persistent headwinds. Export gains are expected to slow, while weak profit growth and ongoing property sector adjustments could limit any economic rebound. The International Monetary Fund has also upgraded its Chinese economic outlook for the year to 5%. Now, it urged the country to reduce its dependence on exports and debt-driven investments and to shift its focus on bolstering consumption. A Chinese telecoms giant ZTE may again be facing a hefty penalty in the U.S. Washington is moving forward with a long-running investigation into alleged foreign bribery. The probe centers on possible violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA, in South America and other regions. Now, ZTE has already paid about $2 billion in penalties during President Trump's first term over export control violations. And now, U.S. officials are working on a new settlement, potentially topping $1 billion and possibly as high as $2 billion, based partly on profits from alleged corrupt contracts. ZTE says it is in communications with U.S. authorities and maintains a zero tolerance towards corruption. There is still no timeline on when a deal might be reached. Any settlement would require Beijing's approval. The news sent ZTE shares sharply lower, down 13% in Hong Kong and 10% in Shenzhen. Shares of Jingdong Industrials, that's a unit of Chinese online retailer JD.com, fell in their Hong Kong debut today. This after a $383 million IPO. They closed flat at the IPO price of $14.10 Hong Kong apiece, after declining by as much as 10%. JDI's IPO fell short of its initial target of $500 million. The long-awaited IPO of Jingdong Industrials, or JDI, comes as U.S. market volatility has weighed on Hong Kong listings, with investor caution rising for new listings after a banner year for initial public offerings in the financial hub. The company is among the final wave of firms closing out bumper offerings for 2025. Listings in the city have raised more than $34 billion this year, on track to end 2025 at a 4-year high. Japan is reportedly preparing new tax breaks to spur corporate investment, even as concerns mount over the country's soaring public debt. The Nikkei reports that Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's government is weighing incentives to boost capital spending at a time when Parliament is set to approve a $117 billion stimulus budget. The report says Tokyo may offer companies up to a 7% tax credit on capital spending or allow immediate depreciation on new assets. Firms would need to meet minimum investment thresholds to qualify. Officials estimate the plan could cut annual tax revenue by about $2.6 billion a year. And this, as government debt hovers at more than twice the size of the economy. Tokyo aims to double annual capital spending to around $1.3 trillion by 2040. The Takaichi administration has also pledged to cut wasteful spending, including reviewing existing special tax measures. Concerns about fiscal debt have sent bond yields to 18-year highs. Yields have also been rising as the market awaits to the extent of which the BOJ will hike rates. Analysts expect a rise of 25 basis points to 0.75% at the central bank's policy meeting next week. The yen remains fragile, pressured by wide interest rate differentials between Japan and the rest of the world. South Korea says it plans to relax rules to separate banking and commerce in a bid to spur investment. Now, civic groups have raised concerns that the move could only benefit big family-run conglomerates. But Finance Minister Koo Yun Choi says it won't interfere with the idea that currently bans industrial powers from controlling banking. Under the revised rules, holding companies may be allowed to have some control over financial units to allow financing in leading-edge technology. Mr. Koo also said the ministry plans to create a new sovereign wealth fund to better manage state revenue, but did not elaborate on the plan. AI spending-related concerns coming back to haunt tech stocks in the region after Oracle missed Wall Street forecasts. A SoftBank Group tanked 7.7% to track Oracle's more than 11% decline in extended trade. Earlier this year, SoftBank, along with Oracle and OpenAI, announced plans to develop AI data centers in the U.S. to build out their ambitious Stargate project. Other Japanese tech stocks also sliding. Equipment maker Tokyo Electron down 1.6%. Silicon wafer maker Shin Etsu also dropping by nearly 4%, while robot maker Fanuc lost more than 2%. Oracle's disappointing results also weighed on chip makers in South Korea, with Samsung lower and SK Hynix losing nearly 4%. Taiwan's TSMC also under pressure, closing the day 2.3 in the red. And that is the latest in business. Otelli.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Okay, well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, U.S. bombers flew with Japanese jets in a show of force, following Chinese-Russian drills near Japan and South Korea.
Aspirations and attitudes of Singaporeans are changing the nation that raised them.
Passionate Singaporeans living out their very ambitious dreams.
I'm looking to write a story of greatness, of extraordinary people impacting communities.
I guess a part of me wanted to connect even deeper with the people.
There's no point playing it safe. Safe will always be forgotten.
If we as Singaporeans are able to have a satellite that we can truly say was conceived, designed, engineered and built in Singapore, wow, how wonderful would it be?
This is Singapore. We don't give up.
First thing in the morning as Asia wakes up to a new day. Get up to speed with major events shaping lives in the region and other parts of the world.
Putting things in perspective with eye-opening reports and expert analysis as a new era of global politics breeds power struggles and shifting alliances.
We get to the heart of the matter and take stock of the issues you're invested in with on-the-ground reports and wall-to-wall coverage. Viewing it all from a regional lens because we put Asia first.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China urges Mexico to drop what it calls protectionist measures after the Latin American nation approved tariffs of up to 50% on Chinese and other Asian goods. Mexico says the move is not tied to U.S. pressure. Hong Kong tightens scaffolding rules following last month's deadly inferno in Tai Po. Contractors are now required to provide proof that the mesh used is fire retardant. And U.S. bombers joined Japanese jets in a show of strength after similar maneuvers by China and Russia. Japan says it has reaffirmed its strong resolve with the U.S. to prevent any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force. It comes as the allies held joint air drills between what is seen as a show of force following similar moves between Russia and China in the region. The U.S.-Japan drills included American B-52 bombers, along with Japanese F-35 stealth fighters and F-15 jets. This also marks the first time the U.S. has asserted its presence along with its ally Japan, after China held drills in the region last week. Beijing today reiterated that its aerial drill with Russia on Tuesday is just part of their annual plans. Tokyo and NATO shared grave concerns over the 8-hour flight that had prompted both Japan and South Korea to scramble intercepting jets.
我想再次强调的是，此次中俄联合空中战略巡航是年度合作计划的项目，展示了双方共同应对地区安全挑战、维护地区和平稳定的决心与能力。日方没必要大惊小怪，对号入座。
Tokyo said last week that the jets it deployed to monitor Chinese exercises involving carrier Liaoning near its islands had been targeted by radar from Chinese J-15 fighters. China said interference had led to radar locks on Japanese self-defense forces aircraft. Beijing and Tokyo are locked in a dispute stretching for more than a month now over comments Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi made about Taiwan. The Japanese leader said in November that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could prompt a military response from Tokyo. Our tensions between Thailand and Cambodia are taking an international turn. Both have written to the UN Security Council, urging it to condemn the other party. Cambodia's UN ambassador, in his letter, claimed unprovoked, unlawful and escalating acts of armed aggression by Thailand, saying they were a serious breach of the UN Charter and other international laws. Now, Phnom Penh wants the Council to condemn Thailand and demand Thai troops cease attacks immediately. The U.S. is a veto-wielding member of the Security Council. President Donald Trump has renewed his diplomatic push to halt the flare-up in fighting, saying he plans to speak to both countries soon. The U.S. and Malaysia had helped to broker a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia earlier this year.
I think I can get them to stop fighting. Who else can do that? Think of it. Settled 8 wars. Every once in a while, one will flame up again, and I have to put out that little flame. I have to put it out, but we're going to put it out again. So I think I'm scheduled to speak to them tomorrow and see if I can. It was unfortunate what happened. I mean, I know exactly what happened. It got it started a little bit, but we'll see if we can put it out.
Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim says he has engaged with the two leaders, citing their willingness to continue negotiations. He stressed a definitive resolution has yet to be reached. Now, fighting flared intensely on Monday and has spread along the border. A total of at least 19 people killed on both sides. And CNA's Saksit Sombat tells us about Thailand's view of Mr. Trump's offer to intervene and the country's military aims at this stage.
Now, there has been already some apprehension at various levels with the first intervention when both countries were engaged in armed clashes 5 months ago. It was a surprise intervention for both countries involved, especially here on the Thai side. Foreign Minister Sihasak Phuongketkeow has told CNA in an earlier interview, admitted as much, that he wasn't expecting US President Donald Trump to personally intervene in that. But then also, not only the foreign minister, but also other parts of the Thai government were skeptical initially because they needed assurances how this peace, how the conditions could be very long-lasting. And as far as we understand from government sources is that attitude has not changed very much. In quite the opposite. They are very much feeling that there needs to be something more sustainable, there needs to be something more tangible in order for not only the fighting to stop, but also no fighting to flare up again between these both countries. But I want to circle back to the letters that both countries have written to the United Nations Security Council, because if you look at them and you look at the wording, they are almost very similar. You only need to exchange out the names of the countries. Of course, both countries accusing each other of firing first, both countries accusing each other of breaching various articles of the United Nations Charter, and both countries not only calling for a cessation of the hostilities, but also for the members of the United Nations Security Council to condemn the other country. That is, of course, still very far away as we are seeing any kind of resolution, or let alone any let-up of the fighting that we are seeing at the border. Now, we heard from various stakeholders, be it the military or the civilian government of Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul, basically saying that they want to put Cambodia's military in a position that, quote, the territorial integrity and national sovereignty will not be threatened by Cambodia any longer. And there is a determination by Thailand to keep the pressure on Cambodia going, but also, of course, the military operations ongoing as well. All in self-defense, that is what the Thai military is claiming. But also it's very interesting to see that while Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul has said that there's no more room for negotiations, that the time is over, but apparently there are talks going on there. We have heard from Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, who spoke to both countries, even though that no resolution or nothing decisive has been mentioned yet. But we are seeing that there are talks going on in the background. There are negotiations going on in the background. What we do not know is that how far apart both countries are from reaching any sort of consensus whatsoever. So as we are entering a fourth day of armed clashes at the border, it seems to be that there is still no let-up in the fighting, but also a diplomatic resolutions to a ceasefire is not in sight either.
Now, the latest flare-up has also upended a truce brokered by the U.S. and Malaysia, putting President Trump's push for peace in jeopardy. Mr. Trump counts it as one of the 8 conflicts he says he's resolved, but some have cast doubt on the longevity of his truce deals. For CNA, Nick Harper has this report from Washington.
But the 8 wars that my administration has ended in just 8 months, there's never been anything like that. Never.
The self-described president of peace. Since he returned to the White House in January, Donald Trump has been keeping score.
As president, my highest aspiration is to bring peace and stability to the world.
And signing peace declaration after peace declaration after peace declaration.
This has become the 8th war that we've ended.
But fresh fighting on the Thai-Cambodia border is undermining one of those seemingly resolved conflicts. More than 100 years in the making, it's a dispute not easily solvable. Here's Waheguru Pal Sidhu, a professor at the Center for Global Affairs at New York University.
Conflict solved is magical thinking on the part of the Trump administration. At best, this was a ceasefire. Not at all a peace agreement. And to think that a ceasefire could resolve a border dispute which has existed from the time of decolonization and problems left by the French withdrawal is really magical thinking.
He urges more regional cooperation, not just outside US pressure. Gregory Pauling is the director of the Southeast Asia program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
It's not a peace deal. It doesn't address any of the underlying problems here. So by its very nature, it's going to be fragile. This also comes at a time of heightened nationalism in both countries. And for Thailand in particular, the current prime minister is effectively a caretaker. He's pledged to call elections by the end of January. So there's a lot of political incentive not to appear weak, not to appear to be browbeaten by the Americans. And so I think that encourages a cycle of escalation that's pretty hard to get out of.
Last week, President Trump welcomed the leaders of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to sign a long-hoped-for peace deal. But since then, thousands have fled as fighting continues in eastern DRC. The very idea of peace has become central to the president's outlook. He's renamed Washington's Institute of Peace, so it now bears his name. And in his recently released national security strategy, the president's vision for foreign policy, the word peace is included 15 times. In the Indo-Pacific, he wants to deter and prevent military conflict, but he wants allies in the region to step up and spend to do much more for collective defence. The document declares the president has cemented his legacy as the president of peace, name-checking Cambodia and Thailand, and Pakistan and India as places he's negotiated peace. Even though New Delhi still denies Washington had a hand in diffusing tensions in India-administered Kashmir earlier this year. Yet the resolution of one conflict is still out of reach: Ukraine.
That's the one that he sees perhaps as the one conflict standing between him and the Nobel Peace Prize. And so I think he's probably going to commit more on that and perhaps even sacrifice some of the core interests of at least one of the countries involved in that conflict. And obviously I'm talking about Ukraine.
Ukraine is on Donald Trump's Christmas wish list. A war that, despite much more engagement than many of the other conflicts, remains the missing piece in the president's global peace plan. For CNA, I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Earlier, CNA spoke to James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania, and he believes Mr. Trump can bring Thailand and Cambodia back to the negotiating table, but noted that finding a solution will be a challenge.
Political leaders get on the phone with Trump, right? I'm sure the Americans and the ASEAN people are talking to the military in the background. Everybody knows that the military holds political power on this issue. But I suspect if it goes any further, even the Thai military understands that they can't be fighting all the time, because you're talking about 500,000 people on the border. You obviously can't shelter them, permanently. So, both sides have, how should I put it, they're under tremendous pressure to come to some sort of agreement. The problem is that how do you get an agreement when both sides do not lose face? In this part of the world, losing face is a very, very important thing. And I think they have to find a way out of this. And I suspect the only way out of this is some sort of observer mission along the border to make sure that clashes do not start again. You have to remember the current clash and the previous clash was just due to border skirmishes that escalated very, very quickly. So if you can have a no man's land between those two countries, say 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers across the line of control, I think that will work. So it's a question of who has the political gravitas to force the Thai military to come online, and also the Cambodian government. That's not an easy thing to do, but I suspect Trump is one of those personalities, a bully personalities, that can get both sides back to the table.
China, meantime, has pledged to focus on building a robust domestic market to counter external challenges. A statement was made after the conclusion of a high-level meeting. The annual Central Economic Work Conference gathers the Central Committee of the ruling party, as well as China's cabinet, to set the tone of the nation's economic policy for next year. Officials at a meeting have added that the nation's economic potential must be fully utilized. They noted to ensure that the market is allowed to operate freely while being well regulated. The officials also signaling a more proactive fiscal policy, as well as a moderately loose monetary stance. The comments coming as China is grappling with a whole range of challenges to sustain its economic growth, including sluggish demand and a prolonged property crisis. Coming up on East Asia Tonight, Hong Kong rolls out new rules for construction scaffolding nets following the city's deadliest blaze in decades.
It's Asia's leading beach destination, but tourists are skipping the Philippines.
Minsan ilang araw, walang mga foreigner.
Why is the archipelago trailing behind its neighbours in visitor arrivals?
The number of tourist arrivals in the Philippines in the last 12 months is about 55-60% of 2019.
People think we're a dangerous place.
And can it attract tourists again?
We just have to do more in marketing our country better.
Insight tonight on CNA.
At Standard Chartered, we're here for those who never stand still, who want trusted expertise in the world's most dynamic markets. Now is your time.
This week on Singapore Hour, hooked on adventure? We've got you covered with 3 wild ways for a good time in Singapore.
I'm just happy that the monkeys are not laughing at us right now.
And a hidden world of artistry where you'd least expect it.
Bird, cat, dog, duck, spider, merlion, all dead but transformed into art.
Get the inside scoop on Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA.
Hawker trade is not just business. It is living their dreams of the love of cooking to feed the community.
How is a chef in a Michelin star kitchen any different from a chef in a hawker center?
Quay bài hát nè mà đết bài em lại bữa lại just to feel bài cái anh tiêu bớt chỉ đâu để rocket
misinformation created panic confusion among the public.
नेपालको ढोकामा हामी उभिरहेका छौं त्यो ढोका खोल्न
When it comes to preserving or protecting my collection, I go to extreme lengths. Most of my pieces are in armored boxes. They have GPS trackers built into it.
なんですけどやっぱ一番好きなのはやっぱり鍛造が一番好きで、その四角いところからそのいろんな形にこう作れるという部分が非常に僕は好きですね。
Hong Kong has announced new safety requirements for scaffold nettings for the construction industry after a recent fire exposed the use of substandard materials and allegedly falsified safety documents. The rules will apply to both new developments and renovation projects, as well as those currently under construction. Support will be provided as contractors adjust to the new requirements.
喺呢個過渡期，我哋相信係需要一啲時間，因為我哋得知咧，其實好多呢啲棚網落咗架之後咧，好多承建商咧都寧願咧係重新訂貨嘅，所以我哋會同建造業議會合作，爭取喺1個月嘅左右嘅時間啦，有首批嘅棚網經過入口同埋檢測之後咧，陸續可以上架。
Well, for more, CNA's correspondent Deborah Wong joins us live from Shenzhen. Deborah, firstly, what are authorities saying about the safety of the scaffolding and netting at all these construction sites? And are there any wider reviews underway following these fires?
So absolutely. We are looking at a 3-step process for the safety review. Contractors now, they must submit certificates and testing documents to prove the integrity of the scaffolding nets. And after they purchase these nets, upon arrival in Hong Kong, they have to take samples of these nets and send them to government-designated laboratories for testing. And also during the renovation process, they would be subjected to random inspections, surprise checks, if you will. And the reason is because a citywide probe after the Tai Po fire uncovered a lot of fraudulent safety certificates. And on top of that, investigations also revealed that the contractors of the Wang Fut estate, the Wang Fut Court estate, where we saw the fire, they actually mixed in substandard netting after Typhoon Ragasa damaged the nets. they mix in substandard netting with the compliant ones and concealed them in places where inspections where it was harder for authorities to inspect them. And so contractors right now, they have to deal with a slew of safety measures. They have to bear the cost of removing these nets and also purchasing new ones to put them up again. And those with cash flow issues will be receiving some assistance from the Construction Industry Council to help with these process. So let's hear more from the press conference.
喺我哋咁多年嚟講咧，無論我哋嘅基建、我哋嘅建造質素、我哋嘅業界，其實喺區域甚至喺國際上咧，都有我哋良好嘅聲譽。但係好不幸，今次我哋睇到業內的確係有個別嘅人士咧唔守規矩，呢啲我會叫佢做害群之馬。唔好因為害群之馬一竹篙打一船人。我哋睇到我哋整個建造業都係好團結，想將自己嘅工作做好，唔好妄自菲薄。我哋要針對嘅問題去處理嘅問題。
So all these changes, they are going to be legally binding, and contractors who fail to comply with any of these testing requirements, they will face consequences such as suspension of work. Now, authorities do expect that the tests could lead to any delays in construction timelines, but they've gotten the buy-in of construction industry leaders. In fact, at the press conference, a series of construction industry leaders stepped forward to support the policy change. And, they also did mention that regardless of the changes that's happening to the industry, it's all necessary in the name of public safety and also to restore confidence.
Well, good to know more stringent measures are in place. But I want to talk about the residents that have been affected by the fires and what sort of support is being offered to them and how quickly is help actually reaching them?
So the government's relief fund has already expanded quite extensively. Now we're looking at a figure of about 3.4 billion Hong Kong dollars. That's estimated about 440 million USD. So owners of the affected flats, they will be receiving about 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Bereaved families, people whose relatives have passed away, they'll be receiving condolence money. Funeral expenses will also be covered. For those who are injured, medical expenses will be covered as well. And the insurance authority, aside from the government, insurance authority has also stepped in to help residents identify the life policies and also trying to help them expedite any of their compensation claims. Various NGOs have also stepped in aside from the government. We are looking at people collecting supplies such as food rations, also blankets and basically living essentials that any of these families need because they lost a lot of their items in the fire. Immigration right now is also helping all these affected residents process their ID cards, their passports, any important documents that they may have lost. And nearly 3,000 people have been relocated so far. A bunch of them are living right now in youth camps, hostels, as well as youth hotels. But while a substantial number of people, about 1,800 people have been relocated to transitional housing. So all these really are just short-term measures. And the bigger question right now is about long-term housing plan for these residents. So industry experts in the last couple of days have weighed in. Lawmakers have also weighed in, some saying that the government should consider building another estate near Wang Fut Court, while others saying that they should relocate these residents into existing housing flats that are currently vacant. Residents, on the other hand, some of them, they do want to return to their houses, especially there was one block that was unaffected. Some do want to return, while others, they say they're too traumatized to return. So all these topics would definitely be raised when LegCo resumes the session. Until then, the fate of the burn site remains up in the air. Ateli.
It's going to take quite a while to resolve everything. Well, thanks so much for that report. CNA's Deborah Wong speaking to us live from Shenzhen. A political scandal that once focused on the former First Lady's alleged ties to the Unification Church is now widening to cabinet members and lawmakers from both the ruling and opposition parties in South Korea. Now, Oceans Minister Chun Jae-soo has resigned over allegations that he received illegal funds. CNA's senior correspondent Lim Yun-suk has more.
South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung has accepted the resignation of Oceans Minister Chon Jae-soo, who offered to step down amid allegations he received illegal funds from the Unification Church. Mr. Chon said the claims were completely false, but added that he was stepping down to avoid disrupting President Lee's government. The development comes after local media reports cited unnamed sources saying a former official at the Unification Church told prosecutors former members of President Lee's Democratic Party had received illicit payments. Unification Church leader Han Ak-ja is currently on trial on charges that she bribed former First Lady Kim Gon-hee in return for business favors. She has denied all allegations. Unification Minister Chung Dong-yong, whose name has appeared in local reports, has also firmly denied accusations. Meanwhile, the opposition People Power Party accused President Lee of pressuring the Unification Church into silence to cover up alleged wrongdoing involving members of its ruling Democratic Party. It called for a special investigation, noting that President Lee on Wednesday urged authorities to thoroughly probe suspected improper links between religious groups and politicians, regardless of party affiliation.
대통령도 여야 없이 철저하게 수사하라고 지시했습니다. 야당에 대해서는 이미 특검에서 충분한 수사가 이루어졌습니다. 남은 것은 여당에 대한 수사입니다. 더불어민주당은 피하지 말고 특검을 수용하기 바랍니다.
With investigations now expanding across political lines, the scandal threatens to deepen, testing President Lee's pledge for impartial accountability in South Korea's political system. Lim Yan-suk, CNA, Seoul.
And finally, 2 Nobel laureates from Japan received their awards at a ceremony in Sweden. Scientist Susumu Kitagawa is among winners of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their development of new molecular structures that can trap vast quantities of gas. While immunologist Shimon Sakaguchi is one of the 3 recipients of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for discovering how the body ensures immune cells attack intruders, but not our own tissues. Now, they received their medals from the Swedish king in central Stockholm. There are now more than 30 Japanese-born individual laureates since the awards were created, clinching prizes in the peace, the sciences, and literature categories. And that wraps up Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can always find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.